My truest and deepest best. The spot is truth, pure and simple. It is the spot of highest sensation of most resonance. When felt in the body, it cannot be faked. In conversation, it is the moment when the unspeakable has just been spoken, the lighting shifts, and a different type of illumination happens. A connection is made underneath the words. The tenor changes and we feel the resonance in our bodies like a gong. We know when we hit it and we are nailed. This is where we come fully alive. The spot is not about laws handed down from on high. It is about the physical texture of existence. It is visceral, energetic, and immediate. In our practice, we seek to be on the spot and nowhere else. To be right on the spot is uncomfortably naked. However, the feeling of not being on the spot, even if it seems incredible, amazing, and exciting, always has a subtle offness. Something is inconsonant about the moment, and we cannot sink in, let go, and relax. There are two ways to respond to this discomfort. The first is to rationalize and justify why we have ended the search for the spot, demonize the search, and then look to the material world to supply what's missing because we're off the spot. The other way is to relentlessly and faithfully search for the spot, to be willing to say no to all of the possible not quite it alternatives, to go through iteration after iteration until we finally find it. Finding the spot in connection is even more difficult. It is a moving target. It is dynamic, but it is definite. More definite than we are comfortable with. The spot is the point of highest sensation. It is raw and unprocessed. True sensation in a control-based world invariably feels inappropriate. It's not about taking care of our or another person's feelings. It's about taking care of feelings. It's not about digging down into the ground of being. It's about digging down into the ground of being from which everything springs. Speaking truth is reliably painful because in order to get there, we must move through any untruth in our soul. We need to be honest to get there. It's like opening a hand that has been clenched tight forever. It hurts at first, but we have to learn to open it in order to reveal the truth. Eros requires this from us, the spot where we realize our truest, deepest, best. So let's see. I'll start by saying I chose this sutra because it's like parts of every week I've kind of put a piece of maybe a small excerpt from the book that's kind of being written about Blackness and the erotic. And this particular sutra just encompasses the book. Like it is, the whole point of the book is to, hopefully, if we can be so bold, to show that there is a path, there are many paths, but a path to back to the nobility of the feminine and of Black culture specifically. And to reach that nobility, to acknowledge that nobility, to live in that nobility, you have to acknowledge your truest and deepest best. And you kind of have to, as best as you can, try to live from that location. And so the book is just about that and various ways to do it and how other people have done it, to show that it's been done before. All it takes is, the simple but not easy remembering, and then, kind of going from there. And so I'll, as always, kind of break down a couple points that stood out to me about the sutra. And so the first one is that speaking the truth is actually like the truth is love. And so, you know, kind of as we talked about, or as I talked about last week, you have to have resonance in your external world, you have to have resonance internally. And that resonance comes from a love of self, not in like a kind of weird, arrogant way, or like or almost like the fake way that a lot of culture kind of says, like, you have to love yourself, but it's actually often more like platitudes of positivity that don't actually require you to tell the truth about who you are, and the truth about what you do, and the truth about your patterns and habits and preferences, and what like how your life is shaped by those things versus allowing your life to be shaped by the truth of who you are. And so in order to actually realize your truest and deepest potential, and that potential is merely who you are, becoming more of yourself, you have to speak the truth. And speaking the truth doesn't start out there to other people. Speaking the truth starts in here. It all starts in here. It all starts in here. It all starts in here. And so to be able to speak the truth, you have to be able to find the truth of your soul and be honest with yourself. And so, you know, I'll probably say this again, like Black culture, any culture that feels like it's been othered in some way. And I try not to use that term because it can get very problematic, but let's see, you know, like I have a personal theory that, and I think this is actually just true, that the different cultures are each other's shadows, right? And so if there is a shadow kind of happening where people, and you have to kind of see, the shadow has to be projected out to be seen oftentimes, so you can actually see what's happening. And if you're conscious enough of it and you can see it, then there's a way that you can kind of integrate it back into yourself. And then that leads to, you know, like all kinds of magnetism and power. It's a whole thing. And so any culture or any kind of group that feels like it has been projected upon, or has been projected upon, that feels like it is a shadow, gets a kind of similar rap where it's like that honesty, we often hide that honesty from ourselves. And to be, you have to kind of see it outside of yourself to actually see it. But then you have to, like, if you see it and if you hear the ring of truth of it, doing your best to acknowledge that and remember that is the first, second, and third step of coming to understand what your truest and deepest self is. You know, like you may spend a lifetime getting to that. You know, like I don't believe that there's like an end goal, but you get a sense of who you actually are. And I think oftentimes that's kind of scary. I mean, I know it's scary for me, you know, it's terrifying, but it's there. And once you hear it, you kind of like, it really doesn't matter what you do. It's kind of hard to unhear it. And so, you know, like there's a way where when people and kind of cultures get into a victimized state, where there's a not understanding that life is co-created, it's harder to hear that truth. And then it's harder to be honest with ourselves. And I think that then it shows up in certain ways. It shows up in, I think the most interesting way it actually shows up is the commercialization of creativity. And that's not to say that like you shouldn't be able to make money off of your art at all. But when it becomes kind of mass market, watered down creation, where it just becomes like it's something off of a production line as opposed to the actual individual expression of the artist or the transmission of a group or a people or an individual, then like that, then that's kind of where it, exactly, like Hallmark, exactly. Then that's kind of where that's where that shift starts to occur, where it becomes, like that truth, that's where the truth starts to get lost. But the thing is that truth is actually the only thing that can kind of fulfill us. That is the only thing that can fulfill us. Once you see it and you don't follow it, once you hear it and you don't follow it, you just don't like there's just discontent. And it may get louder and louder and louder, or it just may dull you and dull you and dull you and dull you. Or it may be some combination of both where like nothing is ever right, nothing ever works, nothing is ever enough. Like I can't have enough attention on me. I can't have enough attention on what, whoever that like we aren't, let's see, where we are never satisfied, even though like we figured out what we want to be fulfilled, like we figured out what we want, we have it, and yet somehow there's never satisfaction. Like if it's not the truth, there's never going to be a satisfaction. It will never work. And so this sutra specifically kind of shows that like it's where you put your focus in your life once you've heard that piece, once you've heard that truth, once you've gotten a glimpse of who you are, even if it's like for a split second, and you can remember it and you can recall it, then the only thing that you should focus on is the truth. Instead of focusing on what is good, like what you deem is good, what you deem is bad, what you deem is right, what you deem is wrong, what is said as fact or what is said as fiction, like what culture says any of those things are. If there's a constant harping of something going on, it's like, there's not enough. I don't have enough. This isn't right. Then it's, like when there's a constant discontent, particularly in the, exactly, particularly, I'd say like even particularly if you're in if you're kind of like in a high intensity, because I don't want to necessarily say eros, because I think it actually happens in other locations too. But I think like if you're in a high kind of energy environment, or there's a certain level of consciousness you have, or the people around you have a certain level of consciousness, whenever there's a lot coming at you that's like, oh, this isn't right. Oh, this isn't right. Oh, this isn't right. It's telling you that like the truth, that you're ignoring the truth, and the truth is trying to come in because you've actually heard it. And I think a lot of Black culture has that. I was writing today about the intro of the book starts out basically kind of some of the story of hip hop, and really how it was spawned in the Bronx, and how kind of hip hop and crack and the crack epidemic almost grew together. That's kind of a weird term, but that's what keeps coming up. They kind of grew up together. And then eventually how in LA, where in New York, there was a higher rate of crack-related arrests and drug raids and hospitalizations. But LA basically changed the crack game. Like Ricky Ross changed the crack game. And, you know, there's theories as to like how that happened. But what he did was he took this drug and made it more readily available and then spread it out, right? But from that devastation, hip hop came out as a way out. You know, whereas drugs and then dealing drugs were different ways out. You know, taking drugs was a way out mentally. You know, but addiction has its own gifts. And then dealing drugs was a way out, quote unquote, materially by getting money and trying to buy your way out. Another byproduct of that was actually hip hop and being able to create your way out. Whether you left the hood or not, whether you left, you know, suburbia, wherever you grew up, you know, whether it was devastated by crack or not, like hip hop provided a creative way out. And then, you know, there's certain points where it kind of gets to a commercialization where there's still pockets and there's still a lot of people who are actually telling the truth of their story. And then the people who are kind of in a commercialized realm are actually telling their story as well. It's just to me, it feels like it's just coming from a different place. You know, like one's coming from the soul, and then one feels like it's kind of coming from a rational based, like, okay, this will make money versus this will make money, or like this will be a hit versus this will make it be a hit. But then in those arenas, you really kind of have to look at like the truth, like hip hop at its rawest just told the truth of what was happening. Like neighborhoods devastated, moms would do anything to keep their stash of crack, you know, homes being destroyed by military tanks run by the LAPD, you know, off of bad tips. So innocent people's homes were destroyed because the police got a bad tip, you know, and this apparently happened over and over and over again. And so it's like looking at what is the truth. And so, like I think I said last week, like the tumescent mind will lie to you in your own voice. It's like, it's anxious, it's often anxious, it doubts, it desperately kind of wants to do something, and something has to be done to fix. And the funny thing about the tumescent mind is it'll try to fix, but in that fixing, it'll keep having to find something to fix. There's always something to fix. Or like not doing anything is a fix, where it's like, oh, no, I don't have to worry about that. You know, when it's something really loud or it's something that's happening in your life, the fix is actually doing nothing, or like kind of letting it dissipate out so that eventually you don't have to do anything, you know, which is, to me, is an interesting point, because the tumescent mind can't ever actually be deemed lazy, right? Like always having to fix in some kind of way. Even if it is by doing nothing. And so like traditionally, it can't really be called lazy. Whereas sloth or laziness in Eros actually means that you are acting, you're doing something, or you're in production, and you can do as much as you want, but you're not actually offering yourself. So you're not actually bringing the truth to the situation. You're just a body that's there doing things. And most often those things are being done, you're keeping busy to get some kind of like external validation or to look good rather than a genuine offering of self. And that's kind of almost what I mean by those two comparisons of art or of music or of hip hop, where it's like the genuine offering of self is to actually show, hey, this is really what's going on. This is what's happening. Y'all might not see this on the news, or you might see it in a different light, but this is what's going on. Like, this is the night of the living baseheads versus a not genuine offering of self, which I don't super have a song for that, but there are many. Pick one of some sort. Yeah. So maybe I'll come back with something and let you guys know. But yeah, so it's like that difference. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're not offering yourself and the truth of yourself, you're not doing anything, really. Like, you're doing stuff, but it doesn't really make a mark. You're not actually like, you're giving an impact on your environment and your world, but you aren't actually contributing. And so there's like this interesting push and pull that kind of happens with the world. And I feel it happens with Black culture, where the thing that actually had hip hop spread so far and so wide and has it be pretty much the largest or the biggest, most widely listened to musical genre is because of the truth. It's not because of some people were looking for external validation and got it. You know, it's the feeling of the truth is what people are drawn to. And then they might get this other stuff on top. And so with that constant push and pull, there's a fundamental hole that's left inside of each individual, inside of the culture, that just means that your center of truth has left. You've left your center of truth. You left yourself. And that's where victimhood kind of comes into play. You've left yourself. And so, you know, it's often like you don't know who you are. Like, you might have an idea of yourself, and that'll come a little bit later, but or more about that'll come a little bit later, but you don't actually know who you are because you left the truth of yourself a long time ago. And that hole can never be filled from leaving yourself. So it's almost like the mind that created the problem is not the mind that can, you know, solve the problem, or that state of mind. So then you start reaching for things that you feel will actually fill that hole. And so it's like, okay, well, say I'm a rapper and I started off really consciously and I, you know, really dug in and gave myself, and people responded to that and they were magnetized by it, and great, cool, awesome. Now I'm starting to get rich, and there's a slight shift where it's like I can still bring some of that flavor out, but more of my attention is going on, how do I maintain this status? And so, you know what, I'm gonna start looking for stuff. I'm gonna start looking for the women. I'm gonna start looking for the men, I don't know. I'm gonna start looking for the jewelry. I'm gonna start looking for the cars. I'm gonna start looking for anything outside of myself that I think will fill the hole that's left by me leaving myself. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to push away anything that feels like it's going to empty me. But as we know in Eros, we fill what is empty and empty what is full. And so at a certain point when you're full, you actually have to empty. Otherwise, you keep getting full and fatter and full and fatter and full and fatter. And then you have no idea who you are. Because you don't know what's going on, because you can't feel yourself, because you won't empty out. And so it's like that, but that kind of has to happen naturally, or at least the impetus for it has to happen naturally. As a lot of us know, it's not easy to digest. It's not easy to feel and empty. But once you see the signs of it and know when it occurs, at least like you naturally start to know when that's supposed to happen. And so that experience of being able to fill up and empty out is disrupted. It's like you become congested, you're disconnected, and you're like, even if it seems like you're disconnected in certain spots, you're not connected to yourself. So then you can't really be connected to other people or other things until you become connected to who you are. And then life just becomes theoretical. Like you might actually see and know what's good. You might understand what's on the spot. Like you might understand what an erotic sutra, like if you kind of got the book and say like you're at home or whatever, and you might understand what the sutra says, but you can't live from it because you're just congested and disconnected and everything's theoretical at this point. And so from there, like your felt sense is off. Because if your felt sense was on, you would know what was on the spot and then you would live in the truth, right? Or you would try to or hope to. And that just kind of happens in all these locations. But just the loudest one is just like victimization. It's like, we are owed this or we are owed that. And regardless of whether that's true or not, nothing happens out here until it happens in here, period. Like, for real. And that's whether you're conscious of it or not. And so if that felt sense is off, you don't quite know what's happening to you because things are happening to you versus you being an active participant in the co-creation of your life. And so, your felt sense is off, you're grabbing for stuff, nothing ever feels right, there's never enough, all this stuff. And then you just continue to kind of be moved by your preferences, not by the truth, but just by your preferences, and then by the labels of stuff. Like, I have a Benz now, that means that I'm this. I have a Maybach Benz, so that means I'm even more of this. I've discovered what the French Riviera means. That means I'm a better this than this, And then it becomes a whole thing where like feeling for the truth looks too hard. So then, you go further and further away from yourself because it's too hard, or it's going to take too much time. And then you just constantly kind of get away from honoring yourself, like having respect for yourself, that's love for yourself, is saying, hey, getting to the truth looks difficult and it looks like it's going to take time, but I'm dedicated to doing that. That's loving yourself. But it starts to feel too difficult and too time consuming because there's a desperation to fill the hole. So you just keep grabbing for stuff. And then that turns into a feeling of insufficiency because nothing is ever enough and you're never satisfied. And then that becomes an identity. And then there's the insufficiency, and then there's an inadequacy. And then there's just like, it's just like this cycle that keeps going and going and going and going and going. And until you can get back to the place where you see the truth of who you are and start moving towards that, you're just going to get further and further away from yourself. You're going to get further and further away from the truth. And it almost just turns into like this interesting self-hatred, where it's like things could look great on the surface. You can have everything that you want, and yet you actually hate yourself because you're not living in the truth and the love of who you are. And then as you're kind of moving further and further away from yourself, you're not good enough, but you're also better than. It's that weird mix. That one's fun. That's a fun one. And you always kind of want to show them, whoever them may be. You know, it could be dominant culture. It could be men. It could be the people at your job. Like you always want to show them, you know. And then you're never like actually showing the natural good of who you are, the true good of who you are. But you just start to grab for things that are deemed good, whether it's actually for you or not, whether it's actually true for you or not. And then when you do that, not only are you getting even further away from yourself, you're killing the thing that you grab for. And I don't mean like physically killing it, but like energetically, there's no more energy. The sensation, like you're not on the spot, so the sensation is dead. There's only routines and discontent. And it doesn't matter if you admit it or not, it's just there. But, you know, there's a way out of that. And that's kind of what the point that I keep kind of making is like, remembering that spot of truth of who you are. So then, you know, as in all things Eros, there's always a stroke, right? And so it's another one of those simple but not easy things where it's like the next action, you have to look at your next action and then ask yourself and be real with yourself. Is it true for us? Is it true for me? Meaning, do I feel cleaner? Do I feel clearer? Do I feel like I actually have more power? Because if I don't, it's not true. If I feel more comfortable or if I feel more like validated, if it feels like so-and-so, like they finally gave me what I was owed, but I don't feel cleaner, clearer, or more powered, it's not true. And so we have all these fights for rights in a certain way, where it's like, I'm going to grab for this thing because like, this is my right and it's good and I'm supposed to have it. And maybe you are, but if it's not true, then you're just going to continue to grab for rights as opposed to finding out what's actually true and grabbing for the, like, and then actually allowing the real thing to come to you in your life or seeking out the real thing. But you have to be honest in your listening and then act on what you hear. So you can hear it all day and you can listen all day. And if you don't make a move towards it and actually stay with that, then you're screwed there too. You know, it takes courage. And, you know, things like the Civil Rights March or the marches, the Civil Rights Movement took courage. Like, I can hear, okay, well, I need to sit at this counter and I need to stay at this counter. They can bring whatever dogs they want to bring in. People can get fire hose outside. They can billy club and handcuff. But if I hear that that's the truth and I don't move towards it, I'm going to feel like a piece of shit later. Period. And if I keep doing that over and over and over and over and over again, the only thing I'm going to feel like, no matter how much I try to cover it up with whatever, I'm going to feel like a piece of shit. I'm going to have shame. And then that's going to have me try to cover that up. And it's never going to go away. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many cars and how much jewelry and how much money I have. There's going to be that whisper in my ear at night that's like, sorry, like, you heard the truth and you didn't move, you know? And the interesting thing is I would say, you know, I kind of said this last week too, it's like Black folks, and again, people who are sort of outside of the dominant culture, have often by necessity needed to see and hear the truth because it kept us alive. You know, where it's like, okay, I want to stand up to this person right now, but I know if I don't, then I'll be able to go home and take care of my family. Or if I don't, if I do stand up here, this is what I need to do. Like the truth, the scenario can be the same in two different instances, but the truth of what needs to be done and the action that needs to occur can be different. And the only way you'll know is to actually hear the truth of what's happening and listening to the truth and then acting on that truth and knowing at the end of the day, that you've gotten closer to who you are, like you've actually gotten closer to the potential of who you are, you know, whether another person, another soul saw it or not, you know. And then again, you know, like there's the two ways to respond. And that's, you know, like I said, you can rationalize and justify why you stop searching for the truth. You can demonize the search. You can look for ways to supply what you're missing, which you're just never gonna get because you're not telling yourself the truth. Anyway, that's the interesting thing too. It's like, oh, I'm gonna reach for these things. Like I'm gonna reach for this money and I'm gonna reach for this fame or whatever. And I have to keep reaching for those things. But I keep hearing, hey, this ain't working. But I keep reaching for those things. It's just such an odd human thing to do. But it's a little bit crazy. Like that's insanity. That's for real insanity. I'm just gonna keep grabbing for more. But you're not even grabbing for what you actually want. Like you're not grabbing for the truth of what you want. So you keep getting a bunch of stuff that you don't actually want. Like you don't actually want. Your brain, like the two-message mind may be telling you want it, but whenever you get it, it's not doing anything for you. So like it's a super odd situation. The human mind is wild. Yeah, so then you try to supply what's missing, but keep making it harder to get to what's missing by making yourself congested and stuffed and starving is what it's often referred to. You're stuffed and starving because you're not actually getting the thing that you are looking for because you won't tell the truth of what you're looking for. Or, you know, as many ancestors before us have done, they've actually like what I feel like I came to understand probably this week, really, is all courage is making a definitive decision and promise to yourself. And that's it. And you just have to keep making that decision and that promise. And that decision and that promise is to listen to the truth. Because then you have to be like, okay, this is uncomfortable. Okay, I'm scared. Okay, what if this, or this goes wrong? But I made a choice. I made a decision. I made a promise to myself. And it doesn't matter if anybody else heard it, because I heard it. And so would I rather be a liar and know the slippery slope of like how that's going to feel inside of me for the rest of my life? Or do I just keep making that choice over and over again and living more of my life, regardless of how afraid I actually am? I really came to understand that this week. And ironically, the path of fear, the path that like where the fear might most be, weirdly turns out to be the saner, not more comfortable, but the saner, almost smoother path. It's so weird. It's wild. And then in that, it's much easier to be able to say, no to the things that you know are off the spot. It's easier, even if they're really close to the spot. Like if you know the ring of truth where like that thing over there looks safer, or it looks shinier, or it comes with a pile of money and you'll be safe and secure for the rest of your life. If it doesn't light you up from the inside, if you aren't nailed by it, if you aren't a little bit afraid of it, or a lot afraid of it, it's not on the spot. But when it's on the spot, it may be just the scariest thing that you see, but you're saner. There's an internal peace that comes with being on the spot. It doesn't matter how electric it is. There is an internal peace that comes from being on the spot. And again, like if it's in connection with other people or another person, then it's like, then that spot constantly moves, but when it's on the spot or you don't, like, or, when it's on the spot and when it's not. Like, it's not it's kind of on the spot. It's either on the spot or it's not. And I think a lot of like Black culture very much is on the spot, and a lot of Black culture is not. But the loudest parts are the spots that are off the spot that people believe is true, or is the truth, or is, how it should be. Doesn't matter how it should be. It matters what's on the spot and what's not, what's true for you, what's true for your group, and what's not. That's it. So I'm actually going to stop it here. I didn't stop early as I thought I would. But yeah, there's a couple extra minutes. If anybody has anything to say, has any comments, questions, again, Yana, keep your concerns to yourself. I was playing. Yeah, so if there's anything anybody wants to say.
Yana.
Well, she prompted me. No, but I do find quite a few general concepts got clarified for me, how to know what is true. Feelings clearer and cleaner versus validated or comfortable. So I love that part. And another thing is like it's kind of almost, well, first actually a question before I say this. It sounds like lying to yourself is kind of like not knowing yourself, or would those be very?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. It really depends on the person, right? So there's a way that you can be ignorant, and then there's a way that you're kind of like deliberately lying to yourself. And a friend of mine pointed out to me once that like there are people who just won't know themselves, and they don't really have access to who they are. And that's really not through a fault of their own necessarily. Sometimes it is, but there just are people that are like that. And so there's a certain level of self-awareness that you kind of have to lie to yourself.
Right. Okay. Right? Makes sense. And I guess it was in the context of the victimhood is really not knowing who you are.
I would say it's either not knowing who you are, it's not being truthful about who you are. So it's kind of that same thing.
Yeah, and then, actually, that was the main point. Yes, so that was just it lends it in a very powerful way. Just how many wrong paths we get on when we just don't know ourselves, or we lie to ourselves. In a way that, and among them now is also the bias, the racial bias. Yet another thing that just lends you in a bad way when you lie to yourself, when you don't know who you
are. Yeah. I mean, it all. I mean, again, like I would say, like it all starts from the internal, and and then things are co-created. So think about it that way. If a bunch of people are kind of lying to themselves, or like don't know who they are, or can't admit who they are, and then they're kind of interacting with each other, they're not really interacting with each other. they're only interacting with like patterns and habits and whatever on top. So there's no real like getting to the essence of who each other actually is, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
And then that
interesting.
leads to all kinds of things.
Thank you.
Harold.
Yeah, the thing, there's a lot of things that hit home with me and on many, many levels. The last thing is that fear, and you follow into that fear, you make action in that fear. That is where the spot is. I was thinking of the last 23 years, and I was in New York at 9/11, and it took my life off the hinges in every shape, form imaginable. And after I had bounced off the walls for a while, I decided to become a volunteer firefighter. So at the age of 44, I started putting on bunker gear and running around with guys that are probably closer to half my age. Now I did this then for the next 18 years. And the honesty of the culture that was involved in those situations was more on the spot than anything I've done in corporate America or corporate any place. And so I'm now going to have to go back and reassess a lot of things that I've done over the great number of years. And there is something right there. There is, when you react out of fear in order to survive, however you define that, there is a level of honesty in there that is tough to beat. Because at that moment, you know, the preconceived culture around you fades into the background. I've just analyzed in another group that a lot of my white collar friends couldn't go with me to where I went when I decided to become a volunteer firefighter. They literally, they shifted the relationship that with me from an honest relationship to just a better homes and gardens surface type relationship. And so the question is also then is, what does that play out on the larger cultural level? Because all of a sudden you need a handful of people to forge out of the cauldron something new, something that's better than was there before. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your share. Wow. Yeah. I really appreciate that. You know, to me, I was always kind of looking for a certain intensity of life in different in different locations. And in some ways, like I knew that I was looking for almost a way to force the truth out of myself, you know, where I would have to go and feel, or either I would go and feel, or I would have to numb out so much that I didn't feel because it was too intense. And it really kind of illuminated, like what you said really kind of illuminated how that can play out with people and how they can play out in what is deemed
Well, what you said earlier about you either go on the spot, you either take that shovel and you start working, beavering forward, or you're looking for a dulling of the senses.
Mhm.
And, you know, we have, that's the reason why I said earlier that this spot's for you, because this is what that whole aim is. Let's dull you out. As soon as you feel good about yourself, have another one. And then they tell you how good you feel seeing the horses, the Clydesdale horses, pulling the wagon, go have another one. Yeah. And, you know, it's a trap. It's a spider's trap. And that's where the commercialization takes over. And, you know, I find we got to fight. If you want to practice fighting, practice was fighting the commercialization that breaks in over your life at every level. open your mailbox, your email box, what have you. I mean, we're in a capitalist society, and we either learn to live with it or we don't. And many people don't, they just succumb to it. But our characters as individual is so forged in this cauldron of attack on your personal true self. So you talk a lot about blackness here. I have lived in London twice, a total of 10 years. If it's not culture, it's a class. If it's not class, it's ageism. We humans are a very peculiar species that we limit each other constantly from growing. It's a very peculiar thing.
It really is. It really is. I don't know necessarily where it stems from. I don't know if it's the feminine, and I don't want to say versus, but like the feminine versus the masculine, where there's a need for separation, but there's a need for community and consensus, and kind of all these differentiation versus the whole. It's just all those things kind of have a tendency to get out of whack, and then we wind up in caste systems and slavery. I don't know. Yeah,
to me, I look for it in Genesis. We are no longer in the Garden of Eden, so you either work at it or you don't, and that's the choice. You either decide to co-create, or you opt out. So I think we're stuck here. I think we're stuck with the work we do, here. I think that is it. There's no shortcut. I haven't found one. The work is the shortcut. That's what a guru of mine told me. That's about the best I could come up with.
Yeah. The work is the work. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Hi, Courtney. Good to see you. I was sorry I couldn't hear the beginning, but I really loved what you said. And I was struck about the part, especially around being on the spot and how it relates to knowing yourself. And it just had me start thinking about because you were talking about the example of job and money. And I remember when I left my 6-figure, very easy in a way job, to be in this path, and how at the time it was scary, and it was like, oh, I'm leaving the comfort and security and all of that. But there was something deep inside of me that was like, this is for sure it, I knew I was deluding myself in that job. I was trying to make it work, and I would be like, oh, this can also be fulfilling and happens to make good money and all of that. So it was such a relief to find something else and be like, oh, I don't have to delude myself anymore. I can just admit, And that was a really big one, but I was just thinking in what you said, and then how just as I get to know myself more in all these spots, then my life gets more on the spot. And a big one for me is speaking up or saying my opinion. And when I don't do that, my life is quite off the spot, And so the more I admit oh, this is what's actually true, or this is what's real, then things shift. And in all those places, how it can be so scary, it takes courage, like you said. But then when I do it, it's I can breathe again, and I in a way that I didn't even know I wasn't breathing until I start breathing again. So
yeah. Thank you. That's it. It's you say the thing, and then everything gets brighter, and then there's all this electricity, and you're oh my God, there's but then it's but I can breathe. I'm actually saying.
Right. It's almost
a lot, but I'm sane.
Yeah. So it's almost you're how did I not say that? But then when you don't say it, you're how could I ever say it? Or that's my experience. You're how could I ever say this? And then you say it and you're how could I ever not say it? So
yeah.
Thank you.
That is all the time we have. And this is the end of this series. We're going to get some more though, right?
Yeah, I haven't figured out what, but there's something that we'll know in the next week or so. But
So everybody stay tuned. Thank you, Courtney.
thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney.